Today we're going to be talking about how porn can have a negative effect on our thoughts and our lives more than we might realize. Hi, my name is Luke Vu. I'm a clinical psychologist, mental health expert helping young men overcome digital addiction, depression, and anxiety. So quick disclaimer, I'm not just psych, this isn't treatment, and if you need a psych, you should find a registered qualified psychologist in your area. So why are we so drawn to pornography? Simply, we have this innate biological drive to find sex interesting and important. Pornography shows us the simulated sex, and we respond both mentally and physically with excitement, interest, and arousal. Your brain responds to simulated sex like an opportunity to have physical sex. So why it's interesting is really a no-brainer. In fact, modern pornography is considered a supernormal stimulus. It produces an exaggerated response beyond what we would normally encounter in our evolutionary past. So we find it way more appealing than what is biologically advantageous to us. So for example, problem porn habits tend to impair real-life sexual interactions for basically flashing pixels on a screen. On top of all that, it is endlessly available, novel, and free. There is always something new or surprising. It is so difficult to become bored to online pornography. How is porn completely different from real-life intimacy? There is a lot of different types of porn, from amateur, animated, to studio productions, and everything in between. The actors and actresses are physically attractive sex professionals that engage in high-tempo, high-energy sex across a range of positions that require impressive physical dexterity, eventually portraying real or simulated orgasms that are visually exaggerated. From a practical standpoint, just like a movie, we don't see the multiple takes, the editing, the actors and actresses' pre-planned choreography. We don't see the discomfort and the physical and emotional stress that the actors and actresses experience when they are trying to perform the scene. From a psychological and emotional standpoint, we only see the sexual act and not the connection that is required for satisfying sexual interactions in an intimate relationship. Real-life intimacy is far more complex. It's a verbal and physical dialogue, usually between two parties, about expectations, vulnerabilities, boundaries, discovery, and preferences. Pornography is a portrayal of fantasy sex, like how action movies portray a type of fantasy violence. Rambo isn't an accurate description of war. It isn't meant to be. Neither is pornography. So what are some of the basic expectations that porn can misinform? Briefly, there are three main categories. The first is misinformed expectations of your self-image, such as your penis size, beauty standards, body image. You might have questions. Am I large enough for my partner? Am I good in bed? Does my partner approve of my sexual techniques? The second is misinformed expectations of your partner. Porn can sometimes give us an unrealistic expectation of our partner. It's important to have a dialogue with your partner about their preferences, their boundaries, their bodies, what feels good to them, rather than what you might think should feel good from what you watched on screen. Misinformed expectations of sex. Porn can give us unrealistic expectations about sex and intimacy. For example, the intensity of intercourse, the duration of intercourse, the borderline acrobatic dexterity to perform some of the positions. Even the verbal dialogue is often scripted. Don't forget, these actors and actresses are athletes and professionals in their own right, who have years of experience and also the mental and physical attributes for them to perform in that industry. Overall, pornography represents penetrative sex as the main act rather than a small part of intimacy. Satisfying and connecting meaningfully with your partner takes more than an orgasm. What happens when someone imposes these false standards on themselves? There are a range of issues if some of these beliefs go unchecked. But here are two of the main ones. Using sexual performance as an indicator of your self-worth. If you believe your sexual prowess is a marker of your self-esteem and self-worth, you might start finding yourself feeling quite fragile when you run into performance issues. And after repeated difficulties, it's common to see people have thoughts of inadequacy, failure, and self-worthlessness. And this sort of sucks, because sex doesn't have to be this way. Even if you experience sexual functioning or arousal difficulties, you can still connect meaningfully with your partner. It's not all about you. It's about both of you. Anxiety and sex. If you're prone to anxious thoughts, you might find yourself more and more concerned about your next sexual encounter, worrying if your difficulties will return. You might feel that the stakes are higher. Sometimes this leads to having significant anxiety symptoms about whether or not you will perform, which often leads to more performance issues. A vicious cycle. So why did these issues even arise? Perhaps it's time you've asked yourself, why is sexual performance so important? I think broadly speaking, the most common symptom is the conscious or subconscious belief that sex is something that I do to someone rather than with someone. Issues tend to arise when your self-esteem becomes a function of unrealistic sexual expectations for yourself and for your partner. Can I still be affected by pornography, even though I know it's fictional entertainment? Most people understand that pornography is fictional entertainment, but it can still consciously or subconsciously influence you. For some people, pornography may be their primary source of sexual education in their teens. Their beliefs and norms may not be reevaluated until it becomes problematic. So even if you can't openly acknowledge the fictional aspect of porn, for some, it affects how their bodies respond to real-life interactions. Does one require treatment to change habits and behavior? What are some of the things I could do to rewire myself? Not everyone requires professional treatment for problematic porn use. If you think that your control of porn is shaky, follow these 3 steps. The first step is to regulate your porn. Set your category and choose your frequency mindfully. Choose a category and frequency that is in line with your moral and ethical code. And choose a pattern that doesn't produce long-term negative consequences or negative emotions. The second step is to take ownership of your sexual education. Educate yourself about sex, sexuality, sexual relationships, and boundaries. This might mean researching within your moral and ethical domain about what a healthy sexual relationship looks like. For those that are religious, sometimes your pornography use will conflict with your religious teachings. That's something that you have to negotiate with yourself, how strictly or flexibly you adhere to your practices. And if you prefer secular guidelines, there are no shortage of literature on sexuality and healthy intimacy. Check out some links in the description below. Third, communication is key. If the majority of your sexual education has been through pornography, it's likely you haven't been accustomed to the idea of discussing sexual, emotional, and psychological needs with your partner. The core challenge is that if you're experiencing problems with porn, sex, and self-standards, you tend to keep it private, and you often suffer in silence. Sometimes there are strong feelings of shame or embarrassment that prevent you from seeking help or having a dialogue with your sexual partner. Practice communicating with your partner about your sexual thoughts, interests, and needs and boundaries. Shift the frame from something that you do to someone to something that you do with someone. I hope this helped you better understand the many different ways that porn may have affected you. And if you found this useful, don't forget to hit subscribe. I'm Luke Vu. Be kind, be you. Catch you next time.